By the grace of God, I've been lifted out of a limitation of time and space and placed in other parts of the world at a time when the rest of the world is changing. And that has given me a sense of consciousness and awareness that I suspect is not typical of most Americans. In other words, I've been everywhere and gone everywhere, over 80 countries, and have worked there all over the world, and see uniqueness every place I go, and see promise wherever I go, but also see pain and see the limitations that come from being trapped in one's own cultural framework. But as an internationalist, I'm busy trying to make sense out of things that are inherently different. Let me give you an example. I think so often of an event that occurred in Nigeria once, fairly early in my career. I was in a theological seminary in Jos, Nigeria, and I'd been doing some research under sponsorship of the Ford Foundation, doing some work on how people in that context were learning, how they were going about the learning tasks. And I won't get into the nature of the research, but it was that as a motive. And on one occasion, on an evening, I recall so clearly, I had maybe 2 or 3 dozen, maybe 3 dozen of the students who had volunteered to come and sit in for a session with me where I would, among other things, give them one of the tests that I was using to assess how they were looking at the teaching-learning process. It was a good-natured bunch, and we developed a pretty good rapport, and everybody was feeling almost too jolly, and I was a little concerned that it was going to turn into too much of a jolly evening. But I tried to be fairly precise in what I wanted them to do and how I wanted them to respond to the items. And I gave out this test. And in the giving out of this test, I thought, wow, I have come across as really an ogre here tonight. And they're going to say, oh, this guy really is a tough bird. And they're not going to react very well to that. So I'll give them an American comment and see how they take it. So after I'd given all these instructions, I winked and I said, now, don't cheat. Do your own work. I didn't think much of it at the time, but I thought, well, wait a minute, hold on. Wonder what they made of that. Wonder how they reacted to that. I had no way to know. So I just kind of stood there and they got busy on their papers. I told them it was a timed test, and I'd made a business of starting the clock, and they knew that. And they started writing. I could see the papers scratching, and they were going at it, and they were writing. I thought, oh, well, this is going to work. At least so I thought. And about, 60 seconds later, I detected that the whole thing was falling apart. Because instead of doing their independent work, I could see people leaning over, looking at the other guy's paper, all the things you don't want to see in a situation where you're allegedly doing some testing, and looking at each other's papers and muttering to each other and talking and carrying on. It got louder and louder and louder, and I thought, what in the world is going on? Well, in the room was one American, in addition to me, a fellow I later learned to thoroughly respect, but he was a bit of a joker. I thought, oh my gosh, I'll bet he has put them up to this. He has probably said to them, whatever Ted asks you to do, don't do it. I had no other way to interpret what was going on because it was just chaos. So I walked very purposefully back to where this fellow was sitting in the back row. And he was sitting there grinning like a Chessy cat. And I said, I called him by name, "What did you tell them?" And he just simply continued his grin and looked up at me and said, "Don't blame me. You did it." And I thought, what is he talking about? So I went back to he said one other thing. He said, if you want to learn something tonight, go ask them to tell you what it means to cheat. Well, that made a lot of sense to me, but I didn't quite get it. So I went to the front of the room and I said, okay, now wait a minute, hold on, this isn't going to work. Because you really created a problem here. And I had a hard time not being really unpleasant about it. But I knew we'd wasted the evening because I couldn't restart this test. I couldn't turn the clock back. They were in a state of utter happy-go-lucky camaraderie. They were being very Nigerian. And I said, my friend back here, and I named him, tells me that I can learn something here tonight if I ask you this question. What does it mean to cheat? And in my mind I was saying, you know, I just said that, don't cheat. I said that in humor, and they knew I was talking in humor. So what are they going to say? Well, the whole room just went stony silent. And about that time, a great, tall Hausa tribesman stood up in the middle of the class, uncoiled himself from his desk and stood up full erect, as only a British-oriented student can do. He said, "Sir, to cheat is to withhold from a brother that which he needs." Boom. To cheat is to withhold from a brother that which he needs. I just about collapsed. This is what being an internationalist means. It means being strong enough to say, tell me what this means to you, and then to listen appreciatively as people explain why their world is different. I'll have to say that I started out in the home of a family that was a mission-related family. Our great aunt was a China missionary for many years. She was in China from 1905 till the Japanese scared them out in the beginning of World War II. And when she came back and lived in our home, my brother and I had a chance to really discover what it was to be a missionary, to be an internationalist, to live the life that Aunt Mabel had lived. And that was back in the days when missionaries didn't go home after each term on the field. They, quite often, as Aunt Mabel's case was, would stay right on the field forever. I think she was home maybe once or twice in the years between 1905, 1906 till 1941. And she used to sit us in the floor. Our whole family would sit on the floor in a circle and eat with chopsticks once or twice a week, because it made Aunt Mabel more comfortable and it made us more interested. And she told stories, and my brother heard the stories, I heard the stories. We just lived for Aunt Mabel's stories. And through those experiences, I was set up to be, I think, in the providence of God, set up to be an internationalist. And so consequently, my life included China from age 7, 8, longing through there, on up. Always conscious of Aunt Mabel in China, and then experiencing with Aunt Mabel as she came home, and she lived and died in our home because she was very ill when she got back. And it was a great experience. But to me, the internationalist is a person who continually accepts that which is different, unpredictable, unexpected, unusual, not normal in the way we think of our lives as being normal, but odd, and yet accepts all that as being right. And in its own terms, that is the way the world really is. It is made of many, 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 many variables. Some that we'd have never run into until we experience things with a person from Afghanistan. We experience things with a person who's a Uyghur in West China, East China, West China. We just have to accept those realities and learn to work within them, appreciate them, value them, not attempting to change them, but attempting to mobilize them with the people there so that their lives can be more in command of their circumstances. And even that is a cultural value that many don't share. So you have to learn how to deal with people who are sadly placid, sadly disinvolved, sadly unable to see how they would possibly do anything in the culture that they're trapped in. But what you don't do is you don't walk in and say, we are here to bring you the good news. We are here to show you a better way. We are here to change things. You don't do that. Even when your motive is, among other things, to see that some kinds of change can start, you don't announce that as being your purpose. Your purpose here is to enjoy and participate and to value all that is here and all that you can value, and then to enlarge that so that people can come back toward your culture as you move toward theirs. And that is what an internationalist is all about. An internationalist is involved in a two-way street. These are the things that are so crucial. Now, in the story I told of the Nigerian incident, that's, I think, a prime example, a really beautiful example. Because what this man said was the last thing I could have thought of a person saying in a circumstance like that. To cheat is to work from someone else's paper. To cheat is to copy something that you didn't create. To cheat is to do, and we mentioned all the things that we talk about when we talk about plagiarism, when we talk about the corruptions of stolen stuff. He wasn't thinking stolen stuff. His world was made up of hungry people. And when he said to cheat is to withhold from a brother that which he needs, it hit me so hard. I almost passed out. I knew that he was right. I knew that he spoke the truth.